Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I'm grateful to Groucho Marx, who's just resumed his seat, because, you know, if you don't...
Order. The member will withdraw.
I withdraw, Mr Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister who echoed Groucho Marx when he resumed his seat. If you don't like these principles, I've got another set, because that's what we heard from the Minister just now. You know, it's all very well to say that the National Party is the party of private property and of liberal interests in this, but, you know, when it comes to this piece of legislation, we'll shelve that. As for David Seymour on that, bought off by a 10-year review. That's the price? Geez, you could have bid it up a little bit higher and maybe we'll see an explosion of charter schools or something like that as a result of this deal that's been done between the National Party and the ACT Party. Mr Chair, the Minister's response to those questions was wholly inadequate. Let's start with a couple of important points. Every piece of legislation currently on the books that relates to the Public Works Act comes under the Public Works Act. It's not the Minister's right to stand up and say, well, the Housing Act meant this and so the Public Works Act goes out the window. I know this very well, Mr Chair. I brought a bill to this House on behalf of the Wellington City Council this year where we tried to do exactly what the Minister is doing today. And actually the government denied us the right to do that. So the law, the Housing Act, has the Public Works Act that effectively overrides it. That's the point of the Public Works Act. So just coming to the House and saying, oh, well, we've got this bit of a conflict, so we're going to get rid of the Public Works Act, is not a good enough response from the Minister. The second point in what the Minister just told us that is completely ridiculous was he took the example of the last government allowing houses that were state houses in the Remutaka electorate to be on-sold. Now, the question there is not whether or not a government can do that, it's what then happens under the Public Works Act, which is, under Section 40, that it has to be offered back to the original owners. The Minister didn't answer who were the original owners of that land because it's the government, it's the state. That's the point. That is the very point of it. Now, the question the Minister actually has to answer and failed to answer is why this has been done under urgency. There may well be good reason why this issue has drawn itself to the attention of the government. But the problem is, Mr Chair, the Parliament is not being treated with respect on this matter. The paper that I tabled in the House earlier, the Cabinet paper that describes this bill, in the section covering the matters dealt with under Part 2, has 1, 2, 3 paragraphs redacted. Those paragraphs are being withheld. And I venture to suggest, Mr Chair, that what those paragraphs tell us is that there is some form of legal challenge coming to the government's program of house or land sales. And I would further venture to suggest, Mr Chair, that that might have something to do with the Hobsonville development. Because if we actually look into who or what the purpose for which Hobsonville land was originally taken, that's where the government gets itself into trouble. Because Section 40 of the Public Works Act says where any land under this Act or in any other manner for any public work is no longer required for that public work. It's not an or that comes next, Mr Chair, it's an and. And is not required for any other public work and is not required for any exchange under various other matters. So the government, when it is disposing of land, has to establish whether or not it is required for that public work. Now, we will do some research, I'm sure my colleagues may have already done this, around exactly why Hobsonville and the other land that the government is working on in terms of its housing program was taken. But I would venture to suggest there may well be a challenge. But, Mr Chair, we're doing this under urgency and we're not being told. The Parliament's not being told. So I want a Minister in the chair to stand up and be upfront and honest with this Parliament about what is driving this process being done under urgency. Because the public of New Zealand deserve the right to know. There is nothing urgent about passing Part 2, Mr Speaker, on the surface. According to the Minister, this is how it's always been done. This is the way in which it's always been done. There's nothing to see here. Apparently, we're not trampling on anyone's rights to have it offered back. The departmental disclosure statement, Mr Chair.
Grant Robertson.
The departmental disclosure statement tells us that apparently no one's rights are being changed by this law. How can that possibly be true, Mr Chair? Because quite clearly under Section 40 of the Public Works Act, there is an offer back right to those who were the original owners of the land. That is quite clearly true. So clearly, that's a property right. So quite clearly, someone's property right is being compromised by this law. So we have a major problem in the way the government is bringing this bill to the House. They are not being honest with New Zealanders about the consequences of this piece of legislation. And ministers who are, and the minister and the chair now, must have been in the cabinet discussion. And I'm also going to make another suggestion to the House. I don't think cabinet is fully in agreement on this. I think we'll find that the cabinet has had a vigorous debate about this, and many members of the cabinet are uncomfortable about this change because they know it is a significant thing to change and take away the Public Works Act from operating as it does on any other piece of legislation as a check on the government when it goes to sell off land. I'm going to make several other points, Mr Chair, and I'm going to run out of time in this call, so I will seek others. When one looks at what is in Section 10 of the bill, we have to be absolutely clear that there is no guarantee in here that what happens to this land will be to support housing. That's not guaranteed in Section 10, and I ask the ministers to stand up and confirm that to us, particularly when it's all dressed up in the idea, as Dr Smith finished his contribution on making sure people have roofs over their head. This could go off in all sorts of directions. Commercial buildings, other services that are required. The definition's broad enough in this in Section 10.2 here, to my mind, to create the possibility that this land won't end up being used for housing at all. Now, this is exactly what we could explore in a proper select committee process to ensure that we do achieve the goal that I think is shared across the Parliament, that we use public land in the best interests of the people of New Zealand and in providing affordable housing for New Zealanders to buy and for that housing to be developed. That is shared across the House. I don't know that Part 2 achieves that. It looks to me as if what Part 2 is doing is trying to deal with a problem that's come up in front of the Cabinet with a specific parcel of land and a possible legal challenge. That's what it looks like, but we're not being told that. We're being kept in the dark, and the people of New Zealand are being kept in the dark by this government. I've tabled that cabinet paper today. It's on the public record. There are paragraphs missing. We need a minister to stand up and tell us what is really going on here, because in the absence of that, it looks like the government is trying to slip through a change that fundamentally affects the property rights of New Zealanders under urgency without any public scrutiny. Just think about that for a minute. That's the national government deciding to take away the property rights of New Zealanders retrospectively, under urgency, without explaining to New Zealanders why. That is a disgrace, Mr Speaker, Mr Chair. That is an absolute disgrace from a government. John O'Naylor's up the back laughing. He wouldn't have a clue. The National Caucus won't have been told a single thing about what this is about, but it's right here in the Cabinet Papers. And I want the Minister in the chair, Paul Goldsmith, who pretends to be somebody who believes in these principles. He's written all sorts of books about the importance of liberalism, parades around Epsom trying to outright wing David Seymour, and he's not prepared to stand up today and say to New Zealanders what is going on here. Mr Chair, Clause 10 of this bill does not give me confidence that what we are doing in this House today is ensuring the minister's stated objective of making sure that there is more affordable housing available to New Zealanders. I want a minister to stand up and guarantee to us in this House that that is the only outcome of this. And secondly, a minister needs to answer why we are doing this under urgency today. This should be the subject of proper public scrutiny. The fact that it isn't shows the National Government has something to hide on this matter.
Materia Ture.